Today I speak with Tetsu Yung from Canada about the topic of raising bilingual or multilingual children. Tetsu was raised multilingual himself. He was born in Hong Kong to a Taiwanese father and a Japanese mother, and he was exposed to different languages growing up and different Chinese dialects, Taiwanese, Japanese. And at age 6, he went to an American school. And after that, he went to Canada to learn French. So he was in contact with a lot of languages before even hitting puberty. He's also raising multilingual children, and he even wrote a book about it, which is called Pampers to Polyglot. And today we're going to talk about how to raise multilingual children. Tetsu, I'm so glad that you could come on.
Thank you very much for inviting me. I mean, it's an honor.
Let's start with, how do you feel about growing up with multiple languages? How do you feel about that?
In one expression, I'd say I lucked out.
You're what?
I mean, I lucked out.
You lucked
Basically,
out, okay.
I got lucky.
Mm-hmm.
It's because it really, I think it's really the works of my parents before I even, became conscious of my own self as a living. so most of the work was already done before I started school or anything. So I couldn't choose it, and I'm happy that my parents chose it for me, and it's helped out a lot in my life.
And once you were a little bit older and you were able to choose, what were you thinking about that? And I'm speaking about the age where some kids rebel. Like, for instance, I grew up bilingual, German, Russian, and I started rebelling, I think before hitting puberty, and I know many kids do. So what about you?
Well, I think we all go through that, and I went through that. I know perfectly what it feels like when you've got lots of people telling you, "Oh, hey, say this in Japanese. Oh, say this in English." I hated it for a period, a few years during my childhood.
Which age was that, round about?
I would say, during my primary school years, those were, when you
10?
want, yeah, I would say, those were the years where you want to fit in, maybe not as early as 6, 8 or so, I guess, 8 to maybe 12, 14. Those 4 to 6 years, I think, were a period of time where I just wanted to not stick out. But it's hard. It's hard to not stick out when people, you grow up in Taiwan and people know that you go to an American school, and then right away they go, "Wow, say this in English," or, So that's it's the kind of stuff that as a child you don't really understand, but you have to go through. But I think when you think about it, I don't think anybody really, like my parents, they never forced me to learn languages. And I don't think that's something that any parent should do. Well, for one, it's not very effective. And two, it's a phase. It's a phase, and kids, somewhere along the way, they turn around and they realize, it's a treasure, So it's a gift that falls from the sky.
Okay. And
all right.
So you weren't happy about that between 8 and 12. So what were you doing? How were you expressing that?
I don't know. Depends on who. If it's a friend, I'll say a few words. But if they are very insistent, they continue and continue, then obviously I'll get impatient. But no, I'm a diplomatic guy. I didn't make a big deal out of it. But yeah, definitely. There were times that I got impatient, but never got violent about it.
And what about your parents? Did you tell anything to your parents that you want to speak, I don't know, Taiwanese, or were you unhappy that your parents were speaking another language than, I don't know, people speak on the streets? No.
No. I think there were times where I felt a little embarrassed is a strong word. I wouldn't even go as far as that. Just sort of like, wow, in front of my friends at the American school or at the, when I was in Quebec in the French high school, I guess there were times where you just sort of, as a kid, you didn't want too much attention to the fact that you spoke another language with your parents. But like I said, it's not a big deal. It wasn't a big deal for me. Just a little bit annoying at times.
Were you trying?
But now, not at all.
Yeah, now of course. Now we're all smart. Were you trying to speak, I don't know, Taiwanese to your parents?
I spoke Japanese to my mother and Mandarin to my father all the time.
So were there any phases where you were trying to speak the local language to them?
No, never.
Okay.
Never, because it's the weirdest thing. It would be the weirdest thing to speak to my mother in another language. Or, I mean, to speak, my mother speaks, decent English, but I would never speak English with her. Okay. It's just very unnatural. And that's one thing that I do with my kids. I mean, I don't know if you've heard of OPOL, OPOL, basically.
Language?
Yeah, it's usually known for one parent, one language. But for our family, it's one person, one language, because it's not only the parents that's assigned a language. We've got other folks, like an au pair or, in our home, like my kids, they speak Mandarin with me and my father, Japanese with my wife and my mother, and then they speak Spanish with an au pair, and they go to a French daycare. And they were sometimes we have another au pair who speaks English. Otherwise, it's mostly by TV. They've also been to an American daycare when we used to live in Taiwan. So it's associating the person with a language with a person, and we strictly adhere to that. That's how I grew up. When I grew up, like I said, my mother Japanese, my father Mandarin, friends in the streets, it would be Taiwanese. My grandparents and relatives on that side, it was Hakka. It's another dialect in Taiwan. And also we had for a few years I had a little nanny. I still remember her and her little girl. We would always speak in Taiwanese. So that was the environment, and you associate a language with a person, and that's it. You just don't. It's the most natural thing to speak to that person in that language, and I switch around.
Okay, so I'm just postulating a theory here.
Sure.
Is it possible that that's only the case in countries or in regions where it's not unusual to speak more than one language, as in Taiwan or in Quebec?
Well... wow. Okay.
The reason I'm asking is,
just
to give you a little bit more context, is I grew up in Germany, and Germany is a monolingual country. People speak German everywhere. Yeah. And I didn't like that. My parents spoke Russian to me, and I think right about the same age that you were starting to feel annoyed, I was feeling annoyed as well, and I wanted to speak German at home, even though it was weird. I wanted to be like the other kids. I wanted to speak German at home. And I was trying. I was trying to speak German to my parents, but they wouldn't let me.
Okay.
And so at the beginning you said that you think it doesn't work to force your kids. I want to find out whether that's really true, because my parents forced me and it worked for me. And I know that my cousins who were not forced to speak Russian at home, they don't speak Russian very well.
Okay. So that's unfortunate.
So I'm just asking because maybe this is just the case if you're really in a multilingual environment. And I spoke to Richard Simcott, and he said they even moved to Macedonia from the UK because they were afraid of exactly this problem. And in Macedonia,
all right,
it's a multilingual environment. So what are your thoughts on that?
Okay. Well, Quebec is a bilingual environment, so very good exposure to English. It's a French province, so it's mostly French. If you live in Montreal, then you have a very good exposure to English. Outside of Montreal, well, through TV and most people speak a certain level of English at least. So it's accessible, but it's I wouldn't say it's a multilingual
Yeah.
environment like Switzerland, for example. It's got 4 official languages, and Europe in general is, from a distance perspective, there's a lot of cultures and languages that mix. I think more with more accessibility. But that said, what we do here is we try to make add an artificial element to it by inviting au pairs, for example. That can be done as au pairs, or it could be exchange student, AFS, for example, and whatnot. So that introduces one language. We've also had 2 au pairs at a given time, so that you're able to bring in 2 languages. And I think most families, like the great majority of the families that want their children to speak various languages, I don't know, maybe 70-80% would want one more language. Okay. And then another 10-20% that would want 2, and only a handful that would want more than that. It is, I think, the general trend. So to introduce one language, I think it's easily accessible with this technique. Whether it's the parents learning another language and just using that on their kids, not ideal, but it's better than nothing.
Yeah.
And in today's world, a lot of people have cross-cultural marriages or cross-cultural relationships, so it's not very difficult to find parents who speak different mother tongues. So I think it's becoming a world where it's becoming very, very accessible and very, very I think easily implemented.
Yeah, for sure. Do you think that might be that? I just want to stick around with the rebelling thing, because I think this is the biggest factor.
Yes, absolutely.
Of all the parents that try to raise their children bilingual, of all the parents I know, this was the factor that always broke them.
Yeah.
The rebelling. And could it be the reason because you had more than 2 languages, because you were exposed to 3 languages? Like at home,
I'm not saying no, but I don't. The honest answer is I don't really know. And my opinion is I don't think so. Whether it's 1 or 2 or 5, I don't think that is really the issue. It's really how you bring them up and what kind of attitude you cultivate in your kids as early as possible. I started speaking to my wife's tummy in Mandarin. Ever since she was pregnant. It's just they are born into it. It's not something that one day they start going to an American school. Like I went to an American school when I was 6, so that was the first time I started learning English. But I was already in a multilingual environment, from birth, and learning new languages in and of itself is not a trauma, and so I guess, but like I said, just like yourself, there were phases, maybe not as strong as others, but I got annoyed at that. But I think it's a phase, and you just got to wait it out. Forcing, I think, is really counterproductive, and you're going to make your kid hate it. And that would be disastrous. So don't force it, but you can give smaller, bites, or make it easier or less, bring down the pressure. And another thing that's probably better is to incentivize instead, play games in a certain language with them, or get them to do certain, I don't know, if it's to take language classes for a prize, or a bike, or put a positive spin to it, rather than if you don't do this you will be punished. Is sort of how I see it. Okay.
Definitely forcing in this case is very counterproductive. But how would you wait it out? By forcing, I just meant that my parents would not communicate to me in German. If I would say something in German, they would just ignore it. They would just.
Well, all right. Okay. That is something I I think is okay.
Okay.
It is in a way to incentivize. Yeah, they're not forcing you to speak. If you don't want to speak in this language, then you at least you don't get to speak to me.
Yeah.
Or I don't understand your language. Or that's sort of the mentality. I'm not saying you're gonna lose something or you're not gonna get a punishment because you don't speak.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, to talk to me, you have to speak German or Mandarin or at least I would just continue speaking in that language.
So, okay, I know about those types of parents as well that would continue speaking in Russian. And they always have this bilingual conversation. The parents speak Russian, the kids speak either German or English. And so they understand, but they don't have this can go over for years. This can go for years. And the problem is I'm just asking, I know you don't really have experience with this kind of behavior, but I'm just, maybe you have ideas.
But I have seen, I've seen a lot of that. I mean, in North America, there's a lot of immigrants here in Canada, and friends, family, relatives. I have relatives who live in the States, and the kids speak English. They understand Mandarin to a certain level because the parents spoke Mandarin to them. And like I say, well, it's I think it's how you incentivize it. Making that language cool is also very important. Making that language useful is also very important. For example, travel. If your parents say you need to speak Russian, but you've never been to Russia, then you don't really see the practical aspects of it. But if you go to Russia every once in a while, you have friends in Russia, and you have to talk to them in Russian, then there's a use to that language. It becomes more real, and it becomes more natural for the kid to have a rationale to really keep that language, right? And furthermore, what I say about the phase, and you have to wait it out, is that life is long, so it's okay. What is very important, for us, for my family, is to start early. I mentioned this earlier, is to start early because I think it's the ears that are very important. Okay. Any kid that is born has the potential to learn any language in the world. Okay. It's not genetically determined. It's not race. It's not your skin color. A white kid born in Japan will speak Japanese perfectly. Okay. So that said, that's because we think that the human auditory spectrum, there's, I think, from a few hundred hertz to like 20,000 hertz or something like that. There's a spectrum that human ears can hear, and kids can hear the whole spectrum clearly when they're born. However, languages occupy certain zones on this spectrum. And like, for example, Japanese is characteristically a very low sounding, low frequency language, whereas English is more in the mid, higher. And different languages occupy different zones, some wider, some narrower, some occupied bimodally. And when you only listen to one language, you will get accustomed to that zone, whereas the other parts, you become, I guess you sort of lose the keenness of hearing, and you sort of lose the ability to really differentiate clearly in the sounds in the other zones. So one very famous example, I guess, is why Japanese cannot really differentiate between the B and the V and the R and the L. Okay, these are sounds that are created, like in Japan, the R and the L are sort of a hybrid. Okay, the la, li, ru, de, ro is like a hybrid sound that's right between the R and the L, whereas the clear R and the L, when they can't hear it separately. So they sort of lose this ability, or maybe habit, I would say, to really hear it well. And they grow up like that, and they can't hear it, then they can't really decipher the message clearly. And then if you can't decipher it, then you can't really understand it. If you can't really understand it, then it won't stick. If you don't know it, if it doesn't stick, then you can't produce. So this chain of events, I think, is very important to be able to master when you're very, very young, and have your ears open to as wide a range as possible while we're young, and you don't lose it. And I don't know, I think maybe 10 years old or 12 years old, but by then I think it sticks for life. My Mandarin, when I came to Canada, I came to Canada when I was 13, and I didn't speak Mandarin for about, I would say, 15 years, but I never lost it. And I think it's because it's sort of integrated in me, and I don't lose the accent, and I don't because I learned it when I was very early, and it's really the listening part, I think. It's our hypothesis. So coming back to the rebellion, even if they rebel, if you continue to speak, if it's Russian, then it's Russian the whole time. You continue the input. So the kids' ears are continuously being trained by your parents, even though if they don't speak. The speaking part, the vocabulary part, the grammar part, that can wait. But to train your ears well is a very, very young, at a very, very young age. And if you talk to somebody like Tim Keeley, for example, he thinks that if you work hard, you can definitely achieve native level accent, for example. And yeah, I wouldn't go against that, but I think it's just the fact that you probably have to work harder to reacquire your ability to learn, to hear, decipher sounds adequately. So yeah.
Yeah, first of all, the advice about making it relevant to the kid, I think that's really good advice. I haven't been in a Russian speaking country all throughout my, adolescence. So I can see how that would have impacted me. Like, I'm not sure about the waiting out. If you just let the kids speak to you in the local language, I understand how you don't lose you still have the sounds and everything, but what I see mostly is that the kids never come back. Like, they just get used to speaking the local language, and then even though they may reacquire it, they never have that interest because it's not relevant for them. So, but as you said,
well, okay, maybe I understand what you mean, and I think the waiting is not a good term. I mean, what I mean, obviously, is not to passively wait it out. I mean, don't forcefully, and by that I attach a negative connotation to that in terms of penalties or punishments. That's more of what I was thinking. Kids will have to communicate with you, and if you refuse to communicate in another language, that I don't see that as forcing. I see that as sort of an option, I guess, if you have an option to speak to me or not.
Okay. Yeah. So
they will want things. Kids, I mean, they will want another bike or a toy or whatever. So they will have to, go through the parents for something, especially at a younger age. They watch stuff, and then their friends have something, and then they automatically want it, and you can immediately use that and incentivize through that. I mean, I wouldn't say it's the best thing to do, but it's one way. It's one way. But when I grew up, I was living in Taiwan. And like I said, I went to an American school, so English was relevant. I had, families and friends that spoke Hakka, Taiwanese, and my mother tried to give me a few French lessons. Well, she got a tutor for me, but I learned pretty much nothing because it wasn't relevant. And I learned it very quickly once I arrived in Quebec. So yes, the relevance is important. I call it CLAP, contextual language acquisition philosophy. It's the complex term for what most polyglots advocate. You just have to make it relevant. Put them in an environment, let them do things that have something to do with their context. Make their context, relevant. Put them in a sports or hobby, sports team or hobby, something that requires an additional element of language. My childhood was all about remote control cars, and my mother would buy remote control cars that were made in Japan, and all the instructions were all in Japanese. So I had to read them in Japanese. I had to figure out each word, and that's how I learned how to read. I've never taken Japanese lessons in my life, even though my mother was a Japanese instructor at the university. I've never taken a lesson from my mother in terms of languages. And learning Japanese was going to Japan every summer for a few weeks or a month or two, watching TV in Japan. I loved it. I have friends in Japan, and I'd go, play Nintendo at their homes, and watching TV all day. I had to take the newspaper, and the back you have the whole the table of all the programming on TV. So I would have to read that and know what's coming up. I was reading mangas, So that's how I did it.
Yeah, I
See,
love
the
that.
relevance.
Yeah, CLAP, contextual language acquisition
Philosophy.
Yeah, I love that.
It's a philosophy.
This is very good. Like, really make it in the interest of the kid to speak or listen to you in that language, and to expand what they like to that language. That's a very good way. Yeah. Great.
In fact, my kids right now, it's very quiet in the house right now because they are in Taiwan, and I'm going to go join them tonight or tomorrow morning.
Cool. And how do they feel about all of this? About all
my son is 4 years old. He's going on 5 in a few days, in 2 weeks. But so I don't think he has a notion of
languages.
Or how to feel about it yet. He knows that he can speak 5 languages. But I think by the time he was 3 or 2.5, 3, he sort of began to understand the notion of languages. Before that, it was just, speaking to mommy and this. How do you say this when you speak to daddy? That kind of thing. Yeah. But now he knows the terms of the languages that he's speaking. And he now understands that he can switch around, whereas the person he is talking to may not be able to do that. He has to be the bridge between people. He whenever he meets people, I remember maybe when he was 3 or 4, when he meets people, he would proudly say, "I speak 5. I speak 5."
In which language?
And so it's the same as mine. It's English, French, Japanese, Spanish, and Mandarin.
In which language would he say that if he meets a new person?
Well, it depends on who he's talking to.
No, like he meets a completely new stranger. What language would he start speaking?
He would have to guess.
So it's different languages?
Oh, yeah. If he sees a person and he sees him speak French, he's going to automatically know that person speaks French. Okay. He's going to speak in French with that person. Sometimes he makes a mistake. Sometimes, he goes up and he starts in French and finds out that this person speaks English. Okay. If he sees an Asian, then he'll probably try Japanese or Mandarin. So.
Cool. And which language does he speak best, or are they all on the same level?
I think right now, what would be his weakest? I think they're all relatively the same. Mandarin was a bit weaker, but now he's been in Taiwan for 3 weeks now, and in 1 week you see a difference. Suddenly at that age. I mean, it just makes you can really see the improvement, and that's why it's so motivating and so so fun to see them grow.
Yeah.
So when they come back, probably his French is now down a little bit since he's not spoken French for about a month and a half now. He was in Japan before he went to Taiwan. So his Japanese and Mandarin are probably higher. And our au pair is actually with them in Taiwan, so their Spanish has also been continuous. So it's probably very strong right now. English and French are probably taking the back seat as we speak.
And what do you think with you or with children in general that learn several languages? What do you think they compare? How did they compare to kids that grow up monolingual? Like, do you think all languages or even the best language of a multilingual child is worse than the language skills of a child that grows up with one language?
Okay, so you bring up an excellent point. I think this is something that is a lot of parents fear.
Yeah.
So you're trying to probably get to, if you learn 2 languages where you only learn them half as well. If you learn 3 languages, it's going to be 1/3 as well. So to that, I can bring up 2 things. One is that most experts say you need 20 to 25% exposure of your time, your time awake to any given language to get to native or a very significantly high level in that language. Which means if you have 100% time, then you could get to 4 or 5 languages and bring them to a very high level. Second point is it's called the Pareto's law or the 80-20 law. So basically, that law says 20% or a minority of very important material or important things will yield 80% of the results. Yeah. So in other words, many language learners will tell you that any given language, you don't need to know all the words in order to have a good conversation. You need to know the key, the most important, the most repetitive words that are in that language. And that's usually about 20, maybe 30% of the words required, and you can have a very good conversation, right? So if you learn 5 languages, you're not going to learn them at 20% each. You're going to learn most of them, the 5 languages to a very good level. Obviously, you only have 24 hours in a day. So if you go on to like 10 languages, 20 languages, every polyglot faces this problem of time. You only have so much time. So by definition, it's impossible to learn all of them to a native level. So where's the line? Where do you draw the line? I don't know where you draw the line. For us, it's 5. I think it's and I think the kids are doing it to a level of any 4-year-old. Just watch them play. He's going to a daycare in Taiwan right now. Him and his sister, they're going to a daycare in Taiwan very successfully. Integrated, plays with the kids. We've not heard any complaint from the school. So, there's no crying every day. In fact, there was no crying at all. They loved it. They just went, wow, lots of toys, and they start playing with the kid. And my wife sent me a picture. I thought that was pretty funny. It says, this is a picture of his goodbye. And you see him he got in and he's playing with the kids. And he's like, bye-bye, Mom. Didn't even look at the mom. So that was reassuring. We didn't want our kids to be crying every day and hating school or daycare. So it's a good level. I mean, if I come back to the topic, is that the 5 languages that they speak, I would say they're as good as any 4-year-old for that language. Of course, you don't want to talk about astrophysics with them,
And so does that mean in conclusion that, okay, maybe a 4-year-old doesn't have a huge vocabulary, but maybe you growing up with so many languages that you speak them on a native-like level, but that your vocabulary is a little bit more limited in all these languages in comparison to somebody that spoke only one language all their life?
Well, so we have a topic that's very difficult to define. It's like fluency.
Of course,
it's
yeah.
like native level.
Yeah.
What does that mean, really? Just because you spoke one language all your life, does that mean you know the grammar? Is grammar the criteria for fluency, or is that for the level of language, or is it accent? But accent, you can have regionalities, vocabulary. I mean, it could depend on education level, and has nothing to do with languages. So this is, we go into an area where it's just very difficult to define. What is important for me is to use the languages as a communication tool and for social integration and for performance as a contributing citizen of the society. So if they can use the languages and make friends, work, and contribute. That's what's really important. If they want to contribute as a translator, then obviously they will have to acquire a very high level in whatever language that they're using as a translator or interpreter, if they want to do that as a profession. I have used my 5 languages as an interpreter, working for companies like Berlitz, when I was at the university to make ends meet. I don't do it professionally or as a career right now, but that does that make me fluent or not? I guess so, right? It's one way to measure, and when I write stuff like this on the internet, there's always folks going, impossible, 4 years old speaking 5 languages fluently. No, absolutely not. And okay, then I say, I'm sorry. I mean, discussion ends there, right? I guess I used the term wrong, or it's how do you define fluency? I mean, I guess I don't claim that you can talk to him about Pythagoras theory, or so.
Okay. So let me ask you this: of those 5 languages, do you feel like you can communicate in those 5 the same level, or close to the level that somebody that only grew up with that one language can? Okay.
No.
None of them? Or
No. I mean, I have 3 that that I'm native, I would say. English, French, and Japanese. My French, I was away for 12 years. Maybe it's a little lower now. I make a lot of mistakes. I used to love grammar. I used to make sure everything was right. Now I find that I'm making a hell of a lot of mistakes. But native speakers make a lot of mistakes. English, French, whatever. So my accent is definitely Quebec. I mean, people cannot miss it. Quand je parle en français, le monde pense que je suis québécois. Okay, I listen to myself on videos and I go, wow, that's a strong Quebec accent. So that makes me fluent, I guess. My Mandarin. So I stopped using my Mandarin when I was 13, like I said earlier. And then I went back to Japan in 2003, and I had friends from China, and that allowed me to bring it back up. And for a note, it was right back to at least where I was before leaving Taiwan, and improved much more. But it's not. I guess I have native accent, so people would not know that I am not a Taiwanese. They would know I'm not from Beijing. But but if you speak for a while, then oh, maybe you grew up in Canada or U.S. People would sort of find out because of the vocabulary I use, and so that's sort of the level. Spanish I learned when I was 18. I speak it fairly well. I've done a few gigs as an interpreter, like I said, to a few places. But I wouldn't do it as a career, but because I'm not like that strong. A few part-time jobs when I was at the university, and a lot of partying, a lot of partying with my Latino friends. That was the best. That's how I learned Spanish. So,
speaking about Spanish, do you think that learning so many languages at childhood helped you to learn new languages?
I think so.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't prove it. Many people say, oh, because you speak, already a few languages, that it's so easy for you to pick up another one. And I mean, I can't deny that. But I think every language has, its intricacies and its difficulties. If you want to really take it to a high level, I mean, people say, oh, Spanish is so easy, it's just like French and put an O at the end. But well, obviously, if you say fantastic and fantastico, yeah, I understand. But if you say, a carrot is zanahoria, I mean, you'd have no idea that that's how you say it, right? The closest things to life, like food or animals, a fox is called zorro. I mean, who would have guessed? Many of these things are very different. Eat, manger in French is mangiare in Italian. Which you go, okay, pretty good, but it's comer in Spanish. So it's a different set of vocabularies, but that said, a lot of the grammar is fairly close, so it is easier to acquire, I think, than other languages such as German, for example. I did German until intermediate at the university. I don't put that in my 5 languages. I put that as a language that I have down. I got my A in my intermediate course. I can say, ich heiße Tetsu. Ich bin in Deutschland gegangen. But that's pretty much it. I can have coffee and talk about very superficial stuff with people, but it's not in my 5 that I consider fluent in.
But like even unrelated languages, like for instance, do you think you could learn Zulu as quicker than somebody who grew up only with English?
I don't know.
I know you would be guessing, but just...
Probably a little bit of advantage, because some of these languages that have nothing to do with each other have anchors. I call anchors things that you can say, oh, this sounds like this language, or, this is spelled like this language. And that aha moment is something that allows you to make it stick, rather than just going down a list of words like a phone book. So if you have more languages, you probably have more anchors, and the more different the language, and you succeed in finding that anchor, I think it's probably better. Whereas if you have 2 languages that are too close, then you have what is called interference, I think. But either way, I don't know what the level is, but an advantage, I think, you should have. The more languages you already know, you should have, a head start, I think, when you learn more languages. You see patterns,
yeah, that makes sense.
But then again, I'm not a big language learner. Like I said, the 5 languages that I speak, only Spanish that I really learned on my own. I did Italian, Portuguese. Well, Italian and German I studied at school. Italian, I say a few things, but definitely not fluent. Portuguese also, traveling. It's very close to Spanish, so I'm able to sort of, plow my way through using Spanish words and Brazilian Portuguese accent and try to do something with it. I guess I wouldn't be able to do that if I didn't have any Spanish to start with. So there you go. Those are sort of the advantages, I guess.
And you spoke of another thing of accents, that you may or may not have an accent in a certain language. Do you think, what's your strongest language? What do you think?
English.
English?
English is, yeah.
Do you think that you have an accent in English? Like a net accent that, like a foreign accent?
No, I have a North American accent.
Okay. Because I can't tell. Like, your English sounds very neutral. Like I couldn't pinpoint an area.
Well, wow. It's the first time I hear that. And I guess so. I mean, the North American accent, when I say, U.S. and Canada, I don't think there's a big difference, unless you're like way down in the South where you go, y'all, hi y'all, that kind of thing. But otherwise, it sounds pretty neutral. Vocabulary can be a little different. I didn't know until I saw the movie Canadian Bacon that Canadians say a lot of "eh." Hey, you like this, eh? Wow.
Yeah.
Want to go to the cinema, eh? And I used to say that all the time when I first came to Canada. I didn't realize that. And I think I actively deleted that from my vocabulary.
To not sound Canadian.
Well, to not sound too, how would I say? Well, I don't know. It's just a little tick. I guess I didn't like it too much when I saw that they were making a parody on that.
Okay.
So I did take that out. But otherwise, I mean, I'm definitely not British in any, sense of the word for that accent. In fact, when I watch a British movie, there are times, when I can't really decipher well what's being said. I mean, it's probably not just the vocabulary, but also the accent itself. If you go to like Scotland, and then it becomes pretty impossible. It's like a different language in itself.
Yeah. So, do you think that when you meet other English natives in Quebec and you speak to them in English, do they feel like you're from somewhere else, or do they think that no? Okay.
No. In Quebec, especially around the metropolitan areas, Montreal, people are very used to seeing people from elsewhere, and people just know, that any skin color doesn't, mean that you're from, like you're born elsewhere. A lot of kids, born in Canada, born locally into immigrant families here. So if you speak with a good accent, then there's no reason for them to think you're from elsewhere. Whereas if you look, if you're white and you're walking around town in Japan, then first thing they think is you're a foreigner. Right?
Yeah. I'm just asking because, of course, Canada, Quebec is different, but in Germany, there are parents that are afraid to raise their kids multilingual because they think that their child won't be able to speak German with the perfect local accent or dialect that people, even though they are born there and they grew up there, because they're exposed to so many languages, they will not, well, I wouldn't say fit in, but they will not appear as natives to that area or to that country in general. So like that's a worry. I know that's a worry that people have, that parents have. They're afraid that their child won't be able to speak any accent perfect, or like every language they will have some kind of accent. And so about that worry, that's what I'm referring to.
Well, yeah. Well, I find that's like how would I say? That's like saying if you play soccer and you start to play hockey, then you're gonna start losing your ability to play soccer, which just means, it just seems nonsense to me. The ability to learn more things it's a human potential, and kids have infinite potential if you just give them the chance and the environment and the space to do it. They have surprised me, and I consider myself very open-minded, in the things that they can do. I'll be giving a talk at the Polyglot Conference in Iceland, and I'm going to be talking about, raising multilingual kids as a complete package of a multi-talent development. So getting them to do various languages is only part of how we want to raise our kids and educate them. So I showed you earlier, my backyard, with a ski hill and all, and maybe I want to show your viewers a little where we live.
Sure.
Okay. So this is where we live, and I was working in Asia until about 2 years ago, and we came back here, and it's all for the kids. This is where they're gonna call home for their childhood. This is a place where they can go outside and play without me worrying about them getting hit by a car. This is a place where they can strap on their boots and take their skis and be on the hill in like 20 minutes. This is a place where they just, grab their skates and they go out and play hockey. There's everything here. There's golf courses, there's soccer terrains, there's horseback riding, whatever their interests are. We have the environment for it. That's the key point. If they love something, they have the opportunity to do it here, and that's why we came back from Asia to raise our kids here, and we also integrated, into the same philosophy. There's this element of languages, but it's a place for them to really develop as a human being with a lot of talents, skills. Right? They can only develop it if they have the place to do it. They have the tools for it. So we make that accessible by coming back here. So do I think that if they learn to snowboard, that they're going to be very poor skiers or very poor hockey players? No. And it comes down to what we were talking about earlier. Obviously, if they're doing 100 things, then time becomes the constraining element. So where is the line that you draw? And it's also about how much you are able to integrate things. So if they are put into doing something like watching TV and also learning foreign languages, then that's two birds with one stone. The more things that you can do like that, if they are going, to a little school, for example, that near Montreal, they've got Mandarin schools. They make friends there, and if they're just going to go visit friends, and it's always Mandarin. That combines the elements of their fun development and also languages. So how much of those things that you can do together will allow you to really extract the most value out of the time that they're going to spend growing up.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. And I think those are very good. Sorry?
So I was just going to come back to what you were mentioning earlier. If they do 2 languages or 3 languages, are they going to lose out on that? And I really don't think so. Okay. That may begin when you get to like 10, 8 to 10, 12 languages, then then time really becomes a constraining factor. But otherwise, their possibilities are limitless.
Cool. I think this has been very informative for me. Is there a topic we haven't talked about that you would like to address, or do you think?
Well, I don't know. I think it's very simple. Well, I mean, what we do, it's all about thinking about how to create an environment, the context. For development in general. I think we've covered pretty much what we want to do, what we want to say. And on the topic of multilingual kids, I wanted to ask you if you knew about Bella, the little Russian girl.
Yes, I've heard about her.
So because we're doing the talk on multilingual kids, she's coming to our festival in Montreal this summer, the Montreal Language Festival. And I'm very keen on talking to her mother. I've talked to her by chat a few times, and I think they have similar philosophy but different strategies as us in terms of having a sign person for certain languages, but they actually have tutors come in. And she talked to me about the Doman method, something that they use. I've not read into the method, so I don't really know. But yeah, like I said, they're very successful, I think, in raising Bella in 7 languages. So it can be done, and I hope the world would do a lot of this, and we would all have multilingual kids.
Just a side note, is that Bella on your shirt?
Can you see it?
Not now, but I could when you stood up.
There you go.
Yeah,
it is.
Yeah.
No,
Nice.
I wanted to really get this as a on topic, and we made this shirt for the language festival, and can't wait to see her. She's absolutely the cutest thing on earth. So it was pretty surprising that we were able to go get her. So are you gonna be able to come?
Unfortunately not. I will be in Greece at that time.
That's right. You were saying.
Yeah, but you want to have a few words about the Langfest? Maybe advertise it to people that might be interested, that are listening.
Well, thank you. I think I just did the best advertisement. Thank you for asking. August 25 to 27 in Montreal. It is the second edition this year. We've got an amazing lineup of speakers. So Bella, and we have Stephen Krashen. Earlier I talked about hearing, the input. So Stephen Krashen, Steve Kaufman, these are folks that firmly believe that input is very important for fluency, and so both of them are going to be here. We've got Richard Simcott and Alex Rawlings from Polyglot Conference. We have also Lydia from the Polyglot Gathering. So all these event organizers are also going to be here. I'm very glad that we are able to bring in quite a few very famous people, and even like Benny. He's everybody knows Benny. He was here last year, and he's repeating. So we've got about 22 or 3 speakers. Lots of polyglots, some local talents, and it's just going to be a big festival. We want this to be a very inclusive thing for polyglots and beginners alike. It's a place, all the polyglots have been through the difficulties of learning a language, so it's a safe place for everyone to exchange, and for those who are more advanced to help those that are beginning. And it's a place to have fun. We're gonna have seminars, we're gonna have workshops and games and whatnot. So it's happening in Montreal, August 25 to 27 again. And please go check out our website, langfest.org, langfest.org.
All right.
Thank you for the moment.
My pleasure. I'll link to that. I'll make sure to link to that.
Fantastic.
And so your book, Pampers to Polyglots, or what is it? Pampers to Polyglot?
It's Pampers to Polyglot. Yeah, 7 ideas for raising.
Okay.
7 ideas for raising multilinguals like me.
On Amazon, you can.
It is on Amazon. Okay. Thank you very much. Yes.
Any other things where people can find you, or are those the 2 most important ones? Or more about you, more about your methods?
I have a little very simple portal because I reserved a domain called multilinguanaire.com. If you go in there, then you have all the links to all my other activities. Okay. So multilinguanaire, to play with multi-millionaire. Yeah. Don't have the money, but I have the languages. So multilinguanaire.com is a starting point for getting into the stuff that I have. My YouTube channel and my Twitter and whatnot. They're all connected there.
All right. Cool.
Thank you very much.
Tetsu, thank you so much for coming on. And
it's been a pleasure.
For me too. This has been very informative for myself as well. So thanks so much for that.
No problem. And let's do it again. Keep in touch, please.
Yeah, for sure. I hope next year at the Langfest I'll be able to attend, or at the Polyglot Conference this year if you're coming.
I am going. Okay. Yes,
Nice.
I will be there. So maybe we can meet there.
Sounds good. All right.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, you too. Bye.
Yep. Take care.